The dense jungle of southern India was alive with the sounds of nature. Birds chirping in the canopy, monkeys rustling in the trees, and the distant calls of elephants echoing through the vast wilderness. For Arjun, a forest ranger who had spent most of his life protecting these lands, the jungle was home. He knew its every sound, its every secret. But on one fateful afternoon, a cry pierced the air, one that sent chills down his spine. It was deep, sorrowful, and filled with unbearable pain. Without hesitation, Arjun grabbed his rifle, loaded not with bullets but tranquilizers, and rushed toward the sound. Pushing through thick undergrowth, he moved swiftly, guided by the cries. Then he saw him. A young elephant calf, no older than a year, lay collapsed near the muddy banks of the river. His leg was wrapped tightly in a rusted steel snare, cutting deep into his flesh. The ground around him was disturbed, likely from his desperate attempts to break free. His small, beady eyes were filled with fear and agony. Poachers. Arjun clenched his fists. He had seen this before. Hunters set traps to capture young elephants, selling them into captivity or killing them for their tusks. But this one had somehow escaped, only to be left suffering, abandoned and alone. The mother was nowhere in sight. The calf let out another weak cry, his strength fading. Arjun knew he had only minutes to act. Chapter 2. A Life in His Hands. Arjun slowly approached, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "It's okay, little one. I'm here to help." The calf flinched, but was too weak to resist. Carefully, Arjun pulled out his knife and began cutting away the thick wires. Blood seeped from the deep wound, and the sight made his heart clench. After several agonizing minutes, the snare finally snapped free. The elephant let out a weak trumpet, his body trembling. But Arjun wasn't done yet. He pulled out his first aid kit and quickly treated the wound, applying herbal medicine that the locals swore by for healing deep cuts. As he worked, the elephant simply stared at him, silent, as if he understood that Arjun was trying to help. When the treatment was done, Arjun took a step back. Would he be able to stand? At first, the calf struggled, his injured leg barely able to support his weight. But after a few tries, he stood up. Arjun smiled. "That's it, big guy. You're stronger than you know." He could have left him there. The jungle would take care of its own. But something deep inside told Arjun he couldn't walk away just yet. Chapter 3. Healing and Trust. For the next few weeks, Arjun stayed by the calf's side. He built a small shelter near his forest outpost, feeding him fruits and leaves, ensuring he had clean water. Every morning, he carefully cleaned the wound. And every evening, he sat by his side, speaking softly about the jungle, his life, and his promise to protect wildlife. At first, the calf was hesitant, but day by day, he grew closer, pressing his trunk against Arjun's arm, recognizing the man who had saved him. Arjun named him Bola, meaning innocent in Hindi. Weeks turned into months, and Bola grew stronger. His once weak leg healed, and his energy returned. Then the day came when Arjun knew it was time. Bola belonged in the wild. With a heavy heart, he led the young elephant back into the jungle, towards a nearby herd that had recently been spotted. The moment Bola saw them, his ears flapped with excitement. He turned back to Arjun one last time. A long moment passed. Then, as if saying thank you, Bola raised his trunk and gently wrapped it around Arjun's arm before running towards the herd. And just like that, he was gone. Arjun watched him disappear into the trees, wondering if Bola would ever remember him. Chapter 4. The Return. A year passed. The monsoon season came and went, the rivers swelled and receded, and Arjun continued his work, patrolling the jungle, protecting its creatures. Then, on one quiet morning, As he stood by the same river where he had once found Bola, he felt the ground tremble. The trees rustled. The air grew thick with an unmistakable presence. Then he heard it, a deep, rumbling trumpet. Arjun turned. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was Bola. But he was no longer the small, fragile calf Arjun had saved. He was larger, stronger, his tusks just beginning to grow. And yet, his eyes held the same familiarity, the same recognition. Arjun stood frozen as Bola walked toward him, his massive form moving with surprising gentleness. Then, in an unbelievable moment, Bola lifted his trunk and rested it on Arjun's shoulder, just as he had done the day he was freed. A silent thank you, a friendship that time had not erased. Arjun laughed, overcome with emotion, and gently patted Bola's trunk. "You remember, don't you?" For hours, Bola stayed. They walked together, just as they had before. Arjun fed him fresh fruit, and Bola responded with playful nudges, as if he had never left. But as the sun set, Bola turned back towards the jungle. He had a herd now, a life to return to. But before he left, he did something that made Arjun's heart swell. Bola wrapped his trunk around Arjun one last time, as if making a silent promise. Then, with one last trumpet, he disappeared into the jungle once more. Arjun watched him go, a smile on his face. He didn't have to wonder anymore, because he knew Bola would come back. And he did. Every year. Chapter 5. A friendship that lasts forever. As the years passed, Bola returned, every single year. Sometimes alone, sometimes with his new family. Each time he found Arjun, greeting him with the same warmth, the same unspoken gratitude. News of the bond between the ranger and the elephant spread. Villagers, conservationists, and even scientists came to witness the incredible friendship. But to Arjun, it wasn't a spectacle, it was a promise kept. Bola had never forgotten, and neither had he. One day, many years later, as an older Arjun stood once more by the riverbank, watching the sunrise over the jungle he had dedicated his life to protecting, he heard the sound that had become so familiar. The rumbling steps, the swaying trees, the trumpet that echoed across the valley. Bola had returned again, this time with his own calf walking beside him. And as Arjun gently reached out, feeling the familiar rough texture of Bola's trunk against his hand, he knew this was more than just a rescue. It was a friendship that would last for generations.